Welcome, Robin.
Hi, how are you?
Good,
Thank
how
you
are
for having me.
Robin, thank you for agreeing to the interview. So I want to welcome everyone to Meet the Producer series. I'm Dr. Gina Marcello, and this is part of a series for a class that I'm teaching at Rutgers University, the School of Communication and Information for the Masters of Communication and Media. And I have with me here today, and I'm so honored to have with me, Robin Samuels. He's an executive producer who works in reality television. And this is an honor because Robin usually is behind the camera. So I think this is a little bit of a different situation for him. Robin, how are you doing?
Very, very well. Thank you for asking this. Considering what's going on all over the world, it's just nice to stop and talk just for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. So, Robin, for those that are new or that might not be familiar with your work, Robin has an executive producer of shows like A New Leaf, Welcome Home, Millionaire Matchmaker, Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and it looks like Robin is frozen right now. So hopefully, Robin, if you can hear me, you can log out and log back in. That would be fun. Oh, I can hear you. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay.
If you can't see me, do you want me to log back out and in?
No, you can, whatever you think would be comfortable.
You tell me when
Maybe
I
it
come
will
back.
reconnect. Do you think it might reconnect? Technology's so great.
Tell you what, I'll hop out and I'll hop back on the link.
Okay, great. Thanks. So Robin's just going to hop out. While Robin hops out, I want to introduce you. This is the fourth in a series of Meet the Producers. The first person I had on was Tom Izzo, who is a digital media producer for WFAN in New York City and does all of their digital content. The next producer I had on was from radio. It was Al Dukes. He's the executive producer of Boomer and Geo, both also on WFAN Morning Drive. My third interview was with Marlo Donahue, and here comes Robin. Hi.
Hi.
All right. That was good.
Sorry about that.
It happens.
We have no shortage of technical issues out here in Los Angeles as well. So
let's get right to it, Robin. What does an executive producer do?
Look, many people have heard of the title when it comes to film and scripted TV, and those titles can mean a lot of different things. But in reality, or as they like to call it now, unscripted or documentary style television, usually the executive producer is the showrunner. That's a word that nobody knew when I was growing up. You never heard that word. But now, because of Variety and Deadline and Entertainment Weekly, everybody knows that the showrunner is the head person who makes the decisions. But they're not the boss. The boss is always the client, which is the network or the production company you work for. The executive producer, in a weird way, is responsible for getting the show to the network on time and on budget. But they don't really do the schedule, nor do they work on the budget. They have people who do that. They have a line producer, which again is another name that has started to become very public, and people have heard of that. And a line producer also exists in film. Sometimes they're called a production manager. I refer to film because that's what people seem to be familiar with. And that is the same terminology that scripted TV uses. But the reality side of TV certainly does have different terms because it came out of a whole different era of television. It came out of more live, came out of game shows and talk shows. And then around 1990 something, neither of us were born, Gina. There was this cable boom. And to fill a lot of slots in television when all of the cable stations started having their own programming. For those of you old enough to remember, MTV used to just have videos. It was this awful time when they finally stopped having videos. And we had all TV shows. So the executive producers were the ones who ran those shows, but they had a lot of help.
Okay, so speaking of MTV,
yes.
Because you worked at MTV,
I did.
And you were also a student at Rutgers University.
Yes, I'm a proud graduate.
Right. So when you were at Rutgers, we're going to go way back and sort of follow your career path, Robin, because we've talked about over the years how sometimes you don't get the proper direction for a particular field that you're interested in, especially us because we're on the East Coast. To me, anything that happens in Los Angeles is mysterious. So your journey is really important, I think, for the students to hear. So you were an undergraduate English major with a film minor at
Yeah.
Rutgers, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. I had a film minor and I had it was a cinema studies minor.
Okay.
So I back then, I don't think Mason Gross had a making film program. They had more of a film as literature program.
Okay.
And I had a minor in that. I also had a minor in theater just because it was interesting and it also felt like behind the scenes and that sort of thing. Look, I went to Rutgers. I, like many people in their early 20s or late teens, had no idea, but I knew I wanted to do something that was creative. I thought, like many people, that, oh, maybe I'll write, maybe I'll direct. And it wasn't until I got to LA that I started seeing, wait, that's like saying I want to be a rock star or I want to be, there's a path to that, but there's a lot of luck, or like I want to be a famous actor. There are ways you can work in directing and work in editing, work in writing your whole life, but the path to Spielberg, which we all dreamed of as kids, is very specific and involves a lot of being in the right spot in the right time. So I left Rutgers. I stayed over the summer. I was always working in the computer labs. So I had some good tech knowledge. And then I worked through the computer lab. And as the students started returning in September, and I already had my degree, I said, I mean this, if I don't do this now, it's New York or LA if I want to work in entertainment. And New York is very competitive because it is smaller technically. It's not as spread out as LA, literally. And it also just has many more. I mean, obviously the media moguls are there, but it's much smaller, harder to get into. So I drove across the country for the first time and ended up in Los Angeles. And it took I had a little bit of money saved, so it took about 2 months to get a job.
Okay, so but how did you go from driving in your car across the country to working in the industry? I mean, that just seems like such a far.
It does. And I remember all of my friends at that time, they were just so nothing. I love New Jersey. I visit every time I come, but they were just so many people end up staying on the East Coast and growing up there. And they were just excited that I was leaving. Not because they didn't like me. But,
no. Well, no.
You know what I mean? But it was like, oh, someone is going up because New Jersey is smaller and it was rural where I grew up. And, and I knew if I didn't do it when I was young, I had the option to come back and find a job in New York or something. But with an English major, as many of you all know, it is very versatile because you do write with everything you do. Script writing and that sort of thing you can pick up, but knowing how to read and write, not just technically, but to choose the correct words, right. Much like I'm not doing now. But when I'm writing, it's much easier.
So when you got there, you had met a friend. I don't know, were you working at MTV at the time that this happened?
So it took about 2 months. So for 2 months, I was taking, I got a subscription to Variety, which was the daily thing at the time. I think Hollywood Reporter is much bigger now. And I just started familiarizing myself with names and started applying for jobs. The great thing about California is the weather is great. You can work all year. And at that time, I just was lucky that this cable boom was starting. So one of the early shows that MTV was doing was The Real World. It's now gone on 30-odd seasons. But back then it was very different. It was very pure. It was less sort of controlled. A lot of people talk about how much people pre-write reality TV, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Oh, but yeah, do they?
Yes. You can tell, I think. The audience is not fooled into thinking that the Kardashians or the housewives of whatever city suddenly have a fight, on cue when the cameras are around, because our lives don't work that way. But that didn't develop until later. The Real World was very pure. They were really 6 or 7 kids taken from different areas, of course, to promote conflict, but also to promote understanding. So I had seen this show on the East Coast because it was, just coming out when I was graduating. I guess I'm aging myself. And I thought the dialogue was so much more pure. Organic is an overused word out here. But then when I watched Melrose Place, 90210, the other shows that were up at that time that were being written by and acted by 40 and 50-year-olds, The Real World had such a pure dialogue. And my writers, I wanted to write. So my writer's ear just took to that and was like, these people are just speaking. So
And what did you do on the show when you started?
This is great. So I had done some PA work, production assistant work, and on day jobs and stuff, just to get the industry, and taken a couple like day classes. I was a transcriber for The Real World. So the season 2, again, I'm aging myself. I ended up writing what they call writing for the show. It's called story editing, where you take the footage and you sort of work out from a week's worth of footage what half hour you'll end up with. So it's very generous how much footage you get to make an episode. But I ended up transcribing, which was mostly interviews. They go on and do all of these interviews for hours just to get the narration, you might call it, of what the episode, and also to get what they're thinking inside. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a scripted show, you'll see they'll do exposition and they'll be like, Malone, I really think this murder's bad, seems like the same guy. I make fun because I don't work in scripted, but they take it very, very seriously, and they're very, very good at hiding exposition. But we had to do it in a very plain way, and we used the techniques of documentary. So when I was in, I would say, the Rutgers film program, I studied a lot of documentary. So the Maisels, and I mean, everyone that Fred Wiseman is an absolute hero. So we would try in our very young lives to put that into the MTV documentaries, and it caught on. I hadn't done the first season, but I did the second season, and then I ended up a story editor for the 6th season. And for the people who are MTV buffs of the old days, that was Boston.
Awesome. And then what did you do after MTV?
So that was my gateway in. So had I gotten, I worked for a small time at a video production company that did music videos, but also did small films. And they were connected to Troma, which did like very low budget horror films. I'm not going to curse, but I almost said S***TY.
Those horror films. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Performance art over here. Think of The Toxic Avenger was one, and these in New Jersey, like the Killer Tomatoes. We grew up with these, and we were fascinated.
Right. They were great.
Had I stayed in that, I didn't come out. Nobody comes out to LA and knows they want to write and direct, but you don't know really where you'll end up. Because I ended up at MTV, and MTV was a much younger crowd, you could have a higher level job at a younger age.
Okay.
The story editors and all on soap operas or on Dynasty or Dallas, they have a lot of story editors. Or on sitcoms or scripted shows, we're all 40 and 45. I could get in at age 22 at MTV if you were smart, and all of your students are. I could get in at a little higher level because it was such a young crowd, and that was very beneficial. Also, there were a lot of people hiring. So that's why I ended up in documentary-style reality TV, because it's just where I began, and that's where all your connections are. They're all very, very divided.
Right. And we had talked about this. So I want to talk about, in terms of the industry itself, being in Los Angeles, how is reality television, which the general viewer gets very excited about reality TV. When I said, oh, yes, I know you don't believe that, but, sort of scripted content's boring to some people. When they hear reality TV, they're like, oh, how exciting. And it's so familiar to us now. But maybe as a professional in the industry, you can speak about the difference between reality and other types of content, and also differences within the reality genre.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. Originally, as I quickly mentioned, reality was a lower budget way to fill your block of programming in prime time. And since all the cable networks, USA was very early, MTV was very early to adopt, because remember, it was just the original like 4 or 5. With Fox and UPN at the time. So it was a lower budget way, because you didn't have to pay Ted Danson, $500,000 an episode. But it quickly grew, and it quickly, moved into many, many different genres, like you said. The daytime game show, and even the nighttime game show, Wheel of Fortune, and nighttime talk shows were all reality TV in a way. Sure, they had stars. David Letterman or Pat Sajak. I'm using those old timey eras because that's when I came up.
Right.
The Stephen Colbert's of the day. But that is technically reality TV, and those are genres you can get into. I've worked on a couple game shows. It's not my thing. The daily talk show is a grind. It's not my thing. But there are people who got into that and love it. and they truly, truly love it. The people who had graduated from Oprah in Chicago were big time people who came to LA, and they could start up their own talk shows. They had started as, an usher at Oprah, and they promote all the way from within in Chicago.
Wow.
So reality television is different because it has the voyeuristic, besides the budget, which I brought up first, because that's what the executives and the networks were thinking of most. But the way it attracted television viewers, like talk shows and like game shows and daytime talk, it gave you a little bit of a voyeur view into what people might really be like. And once they discovered, maybe your students have studied older documentaries, but The Loud Family on PBS was one of the first instances of, sort of a TV version of a real family that wasn't famous in any way. Nowadays, reality sort of has bent itself backwards to make people famous. But originally, like The Real World and earlier shows, it was trying to find interesting stories, but not just to be cheaper, to be real, to find ways that you could watch people who maybe were like you. The categories in reality TV are very diverse, and a lot of the categories have, made it really embarrassing. I would say reality TV gets a pretty, if you just say that, people think, oh, the Real Housewives flipping tables and yelling at each other. But there are some really, really great, I'm glad that in my career I've been able to steer towards the ones that are more showing real people in real life.
Yes, and that being said, your latest daytime Emmy, you were daytime Emmy nominated. You were nominated for A New Leaf. I know.
So from the beginning of MTV, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, from the beginning of MTV, I was a cog in the wheel as a transcriber, but then I moved up to a story editor, which is what they called the writer of the show. Like I said, you took a week's worth of footage. And a lot of people think you're just condensing it down, but you're really painting with the scenes to make what happened in that week make sense. 20 odd years later, I've graduated. I was a supervising producer probably around 10 years ago, and that was a good credit to have. And then I started getting co-executive producer and executive producer titles. At first, I wasn't the showrunner. There are a couple other high-level management people, but as I slowly moved into showrunning, starting with a small show for YouTube, when YouTube called itself YouTube Red, I ran a show for that, and that was just a half-hour special for YouTube.
Huh.
But then I did 2 educational shows. One was called Welcome Home, which was very much like Extreme Makeover, very sweet, helping people emerging from experiencing homelessness. And then this show, A New Leaf, which was partially, again, these are like PBS shows, but they're Saturday morning, daytime educational shows. And I hadn't worked in the daytime environment before, but is it different? Nice. Yeah, it's very wholesome. Obviously, we have a lot of different rights and clearances standards because it's in the EI space, educational informational space. So if you watch TV, if anybody actually watches TV live anymore, but I'm not kidding, on Saturday mornings, the FCC is still regulated that you have to have educational programming for a certain amount of time. So you'll see an E/I in the top. So the last 2 programs I got to run myself. They were both 26 episode and 13 episode runs. And A New Leaf was working with the Ancestry Corporation.
I love it.
That does DNA and follows up, gives you your DNA. There are many companies. This one happened to be Ancestry. They have several other shows. So they're pretty.
So I wanted to interrupt you. When you start working on a show or you're asked to work on the show, like where does the money come from? Where does the idea come from? How do you get on the show? And I guess that might lead to, do you have an agent?
Great question. A lot of people who do what I do pitch their own shows. I don't. And the reason I don't, I've worked on pitches and worked for people, but the truth is pitching a show is a little bit more chancy. I mean, I think that just makes the most sense. And it's difficult for me with the hours of reality TV to both pitch and go out there and have meetings, and put together a package like people would do in film. So I tend to, my resume, has shows that people have heard of just because I got hired on shows that were already picked up, had already been sold, had already been developed. And I would come in and help develop them if it was a first season or if I was the showrunner. But they were already sold. The networks all work in the traditional manner where they sell advertising time, and if a show doesn't make a particular amount of Nielsen ratings, it goes away. That will change someday, but I think people are too scared to let go of that Nielsen.
What do you think it will turn into?
I don't know. I mean, with streaming viewership and DVRs, it is possible in tech, and this is not my field, in tech to kind of actually know what people are watching, as opposed to use the Nielsen strategy, which is to find a family and track what they're watching. I think the advertisers and the network are scared to let go of that Nielsen. And Nielsen has moved into streaming and into DVR. They call it your ratings plus 3. Who watched it live and who watched it within 3 days on their TiVo, and you get sort of that rating. It's a different number, a newer number that comes up. And look, your students may know a lot more about this than me.
Do you have an agent? Is it common in the industry?
Yes, it's weird because of the TV boom about 20 years ago. About 10 years ago, the major agencies started taking on producers that worked in unscripted. Now, remember, some of the bigger unscripted shows that were booming were things like The Voice, or all of those shows that imitated the old Star Search way of having up and coming performers, and obviously some of those came from England. So those people started getting agents first because they're dealing with multi-million-dollar contracts. And then the agency quickly learned that there were a lot of people working in this, I don't want to say sub genre, but in the more hidden. People hadn't thought of it as, NCIS, you're getting a 20 share. They hadn't thought about the smaller reality shows. So yeah, they started picking up people, and I got an agent about 12 years ago. And then I've moved agencies once, but only because the people that I was connected with moved over to an agency called UTA, so United Talent.
Okay, so does the agent then find the jobs and then pitch you?
Great question. That's how it would work in film.
Okay.
I think they would have a famous actor or a famous director, and they bring them scripts. In reality, it's more of a smaller circle. So if the agency hears of something, they'll put my resume in the pile, but they won't contact me unless there's some interest. Then they'll say, hey, do you have any interest? So they'll pitch me that. But more often than not, it's people that I know that are saying, hey, we're starting this up. You might be right for this. And the agency will make the deal for you.
So this, I think, gets to the importance of being in Los Angeles and being part of the community of producers and script writers, or whatever the direction is you're going in, because you need those connections really, and even for someone to think about you for a job. Yes? People
talk about how it's who you know, but it's really also, it's who you know, but we have less respect for those people who just knew someone. We have more respect for someone who it's who you worked with. And once you've broken into that circle and that loop, then yes, you get a lot of your work from that.
Okay, perfect. Now, what about, we're going to sort of come this way. What do you wish, or what do you know now that you wish you knew then? Would you do anything differently?
Oh, that's a great question. You know me off the air, so you know that I'm not a person that has a lot of regrets. However, that's a really good question, because you're not saying what would I have done differently, but what I wish I knew. I guess I wish I knew to feel free to reach out more. Don't feel like you're going to bug people. They're used to it. You talk about Los Angeles. New York has so many different industries, banking and Madison Avenue and textiles, and LA has all of those things, but in a much smaller way. They have so much more of the entertainment. So you reach out and you talk to people. If you tell people what you want to do, it's the one thing that people have asked me.
Right. So how do you know? Wait, you're new, you're graduating. How do you know without any experience what you want to do?
I admitted already to you that I didn't.
I mean, I don't know what I want to do still.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So some of it was led by when I got there, I was able to take a bunch of small jobs that weren't permanent. So they weren't in any way going to pigeonhole me or anything. Like if I was a runner or PA or even a transcriber for an MTV reality show, at that point, I still could have taken a job at a small studio or in PR or in all of these other jobs that no one thinks about. They think of the director and the actor or the cameraman and the reality star, but there are whole houses of network jobs, and learning as much as you can about those and making a decision quickly, because everything can be undone. We meet people who are coming into reality TV having 20 years in advertising, which makes sense, or in, whether it's raising kids or in an animation studio, or even something that isn't even, one of our producers on Extreme Home Makeover had seen the first season of the show and just wanted to work on it. She was an animator for South Park, and she had done that for years. But as you can imagine, that's staring at a computer screen. This was moving across the country and talking to people. She decided that she knew what she wanted to do and then told people. And somebody got her an interview with me and the line producer. Tell
great.
people what if you ask people for work, it's hard for them to help you. They can get you an entry-level job. But if you tell them, look, I really do want to be a writer, they can say, look, come be a writer's assistant on this show. That will suck and be very low pay for a little while, but you will learn the writer's room, and then they may hire from within, or you can say I was in a writer's room. They can help you in smaller ways as opposed to directly giving you the writer job.
That's great advice. That is such good advice.
I wish I had known it.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing it with the students, right? I think that might just be that little bit of information.
Talk to people. Yeah, tell them what you want to do. It's not egotistical. It's just they're there to be mentors.
What skills or traits do executive producers need to possess? Like, what do you need to be really good at in order to do what you do?
It's not public speaking.
You're a great place. Don't be. Come on, Marvin.
I'm so used to being surrounded by a crew. You really do have to be able to communicate efficiently, quickly, and honestly. There are so many different styles, as you might be able to tell. Mine is very laid back. I like to just be clear and communicate, and since your job is I'll put it this way, literally to be on budget and to get it to the network on time. That's not the part of the job I like. And you have to send video and audio. They can only make the show from the field, and I work both in the field and post. But they can only make the show using the video you capture and the audio you get. So my strategy is always, I don't want to talk about how fun it was. I want to talk about what you got, because a producer will come home from a shoot, come back to the main office or come to post, and they had a laugh ride. And I quickly, for my style, I need to know the scenes that you got, and we can talk about all of that later. So it's organization. It's being able to do the dance between the network and the production company, because all they want to talk about is how you can do it cheaper. And all I want to do is, let's just be honest. I want to make whatever I'm making a little bit more artistic than it could be. I want to make it closer to the documentary styles that I love. I'm not trying to sound pretentious, but I don't want to make something look like it was slapped together. And again, I pick on the Kardashians because I haven't worked there. I'm sure the money's good. Or the Real Housewives. But those are the extremes where people are watching them more as a car crash or as a drive-by, and to see what's going to happen this week. You have to work on those shows. Those are some of the shows that you end up having work on. But I like to try and bring myself into the shows, and to be able to retain that artistic passion while having to deal with everything is what the executive producer, that's the fight you have to do, is to still try and make the show good, despite you being like a director for a feature, the person everyone's coming to ask you for. So
you really have to be able to balance both, right?
Absolutely.
And that must take time.
You end up, if the talent, I know you only use that for film, but if the reality stars are difficult, and they all are once they've passed their first year of realizing that they get paid to just be themselves, there's a lot to handle. And usually there's a good senior staff, that you've trusted and worked with before.
So how many people are typically on a crew with you? So we can just use A New Leaf as an example. How many people are you responsible for?
A New Leaf was a very small show. It's on Hulu. You can watch it on Hulu, but it was on NBC Saturdays. Daisy Fuentes, who's an ex-MTV VJ, was the host. She would come to the people's houses. It had been prearranged, and we knew behind the scenes that they had something in their DNA that was interesting. So for a small show like that, where you really are in one location per day, if she took them on a trip, it would be a different day. You have 2 to 3 camera people. Each camera person has either one AC assistant camera, and you probably hope to have 2 audio people on the set. You'll fight every time, but that's a very small crew. Probably a 12-person footprint
Okay.
Maximum in the house, on the porch, and in the yard. And then you have production coordinators, PAs in the backyard, setting up meals and setting up tables and doing runs and getting stuff. So it's a very small footprint. On a big show,
Right.
it could be 60 to
Like Extreme
70.
Home Makeover Home Edition, right?
Yeah,
So that was an Emmy winning show that you worked on.
yeah, absolutely. We got nominated 3 times and we won twice. And it was,
Incredible.
I mean, it's one of the greatest experiences because that was a show that didn't have a lot of conflict because it was trying to help people. A show like that has 60 to 70 people on the ground. They have a truck and things that are arriving way before we even get there.
Okay, so we're coming to our half-hour mark.
Yeah,
I want to ask
certainly.
you your favorite memory working in television before
Oh,
we open up to questions of the students. I mean,
absolutely.
Robin, I legitimately could sit here and talk to you about this for hours. You just such a wealth of information, and
You're very kind.
I really admire your work, and I admire the fact that you've worked on shows that are doing something positive. Many of them are doing something really nice for other people, and I really do like to see that. That's good TV to me.
I appreciate that. And if I've said anything in a half hour, I hope it says that there are different types of reality TV, and some are harmless, like game shows, and some are trying to do the best they can to do good, and then some are just,
Eye candy.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Nope.
work. My
That's
favorite moment, I mentioned, I got to go up on the Emmy stage for the primetime Emmys. When I was nominated for a new lead, that was a daytime Emmy. So, anyone out here will say, yeah, try the primetime Emmys. But yeah, I got to go on the stage. While I don't have a statue, the show won, so I have a plaque. So I mean, it's a real, it's a real honor.
It's an honor.
Well, look, here's the thing. It wasn't that many years ago that reality wasn't even like cable. Remember, cable had the Cable Ace Awards. They weren't really allowed in the Emmys, and people said, look, this is what we're watching. So reality slowly got a small foothold in the Emmys, and were recognized. Obviously, most of the Emmys, 90% of it is the stars and scripted, and Stephen Colbert who takes them, and John Oliver who take them all home. My favorite memory of work was I grew up watching the Muppets. I got to work with the Muppets. They came on Extreme Home Makeover, and for a week I got to write for the Muppets, direct the Muppets, because the show had to go on, the house had to get built, the family had to get taken care of, and as the lead supervising producer of story at that time, I got to just have a small crew and just work with them. And
is that Kermit behind your shoulder?
That is Kermit. I'm in a mirror. That is that I didn't realize it's there. Steve Whitmire, who until just a couple of years ago is the only guy who did Kermit after Jim Henson passed away. So I got to work with him. He has now retired and left Disney because it's Disney now. It's different. They have more people doing it. But yeah, he signed it. You're not going to be able to read it, but he said to Robin, "Thanks for understanding." Because when we first had the Muppets, some of the producers were like, we'll put Kermit on a wrecking ball and crash him into the house. And I said, no, I'll take care of this. And we had Kermit act as a mini team leader to Ty Pennington. So he had his own little megaphone. I don't know how many people have seen the show. It's older now. But Kermit had his own megaphone, and he would follow Ty around, and because he's the team leader of the Muppets. We should talk about something else.
Yeah, I love it. No, I know. So let's take some questions from the students. So if anyone has any questions, there's going to be a little bit of a delay. Please let me know so that we can ask Robin while we have him. So Justin is a student in my class, and he asks, for those already working within the industry, did you find that they truly enjoyed helping others get their foot in the door? Just asking because how important networking is. Thanks, Justin.
Justin, it's a great question. What I'm trying to tell you is yes. Most people appreciate because you hire somebody, and it's your reputation on the line when you hire the wrong person. And a lot of people don't fire the wrong person because they're the one that brought them on. But specifically to your question, yes. Especially if you come to us and say, this is what I want to get into, and we can honestly say, here's that path, because I wouldn't have known it when I started. I calling it networking, it can be a lot more fun than that. It's not going to those parties and schmoozing. It's really during a break, a meal break or something, just asking someone, how did you get started? And here's what we don't mind. It's not rude to follow up or to email us every week. Hey, it's not rude. We're used to it. Everyone's always bugging each other.
So this is another one of my students, Alyssa. Thanks, Alyssa. For people trying to get their start in the industry, what's something we can be reading or watching or listening to or doing more of to set ourselves apart? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. Okay, the script writing people who when I came here, I was with a lot of young people. We were all not just at MTV, and a lot of them went off to do a lot of different sort of things. So obviously, if you're into script writing, read all the scripts. Go to the websites that show you the scripts that before they were transcriptions of what the movie ended up being. Um, it's a great question. The
What
obvious
about
answer is to read and watch the thing that you'll want to be into. But I actually think being very well read. I was an English major. I still find new novels to read. I say to myself, this would make a great movie. And within 2 years, you see that it's a movie and you're like, hey, I don't do that, but I feel like I'm on the right track.
right?
I, I,
I
I
think
wish I
that's
could answer that one better.
I think maybe one of the things we talked about too, Robin, is that there's a PA school if someone was really interested when they're ready to start working to help with
Yeah.
the right. You did talk about that.
20 years ago, there was a place, I don't know if it exists anymore. So, but there were sort of like 4-day courses where you could take it, and they were a little expensive, but it got you the education that you needed to just be a PA, because you can show up on set and be that kid, that is out of place and is asking everything. But if you know just a little bit, and these days with online resources, DVD commentary was a great resource for me. I know I keep talking about film. I love film. I studied film.
It's
I don't
all
work
good.
in it, but it hasn't diminished my love for
It's
film.
influenced actually probably a lot your work,
Absolutely.
right?
And
Very
all
much.
the DPs, we call them DPs, but they're usually video or digital shooters. They know the references I'm talking about. I'm saying, let's do that third man shot. Let's do this. Let's do this in a noir style. They know what I'm talking about, so I can go into documentary style and say, let's do this way from the back with a long lens, so it looks like they don't know that we're watching them talk, and it subconsciously gives you that effect. You don't feel like your camera's in your face, in the
Right.
people's face, almost as if The Office used this technique, the sitcom.
Yep.
They would shoot through the blinds in the English version, and I know they did it in the American version, and that would make you feel like these people didn't know the camera was there. It's obviously a different style.
Okay, one last question because I know you are working today. So, and again, thank you.
I'm available, but yeah, thank you. I
This
don't
is
want to
from
hold it.
Miranda, another student in class. Do you think there's any value to getting started in New York and then moving to LA with some experience under your belt? Or is it important to just get out to LA, start there, and work your way up there? That's a good question,
That's
Miranda.
a very good question, and I'm a little bit handicapped in answering it, because when I did it 20 years ago, you either went to New York and moved up there, or you went to LA. Now everything is interconnected. Most of the companies, they book out of LA, but a lot of people don't even live in LA once they've been established. The director's going to fly. A lot of reality TV ends up shooting not in LA because the LA residents are tired of us. So we go to Oklahoma, or where the stories are. So it is less important, to try and answer your question directly, to come to LA to get direct experience. However, and financially, I own nothing and knew nothing, so I just drove across. But it's not possible for everyone to just pick up and move. If you're already at Rutgers and already closer to New York, start there, learn there. Numerically, percentage-wise, there's more opportunity in LA, because a lot of stuff, even if the bosses at Viacom are in their offices in New York, that's only the executives. The production managers and all the people hiring are in LA. But with the internet and the way things are, I know people who picked up and moved once they had a job in LA, and they just didn't tell anybody. They had flown out like an actor, or like an actor might fly out for the interview in Toronto, and then just show up. When you're younger, and I don't know how old your students are, especially if they're in the master's program, but you sometimes have a little more flexibility. I did when I was 20, but
Right.
certainly you can go to New York and certainly and people there in LA, what are they looking at? Your resume. And in some ways, having worked the steep skyline of New York, it can be an advantage in an interview. Your resume is just to get you interview questions that you get.
Right. That's a really good answer. I think it's a tough one to answer, but just
And I did it
listening
so
to,
long ago.
yeah, talking to everybody though that have been producers on the series, they all really tell the same story, that one job led to another job that led to another job. And so
Absolutely.
if depending on the industry, I would think that, it might be better to be in LA just because of the connections, and then you're building your network, not in a bad way, but in a
Yeah,
good
to
way.
meet the
People know
people.
your work. Yeah.
Facebook isn't the same as saying, "Hey, after set, can we grab a quick coffee or can we grab a drink?"
Right.
You do get to know somebody a little bit better that way.
Excellent. Robin, I am so thankful for you
That's it.
agreeing. That's it, Robin. I don't want to take any more time. I've known Robin for many, many, many years, and really, it's an honor. And thank you. I'm so very grateful. I'm sure the students are grateful. This is a great interview.
Uh, I
I
just
appreciate your time.
appreciate you asking, and good luck to everybody out there. And I hope something has been useful.
Yeah, very useful. Very useful. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, everybody, for
Thank you, guys.
watching. Have a great day.